be recorded.
Okie doke.
I'm all about consent.
Imagine I said leave meeting. I just went. We great that one. Just gone.
Good morning. Here's Sam Padmore, and off he goes.
No, it's already begun. It's already begun.
Brilliant. What a start. This could be fun. Right. So it's not the morning anymore, is it? It's the afternoon now. So good afternoon, Sam. So this is Sam Padmore, and I'm going to let Sam introduce himself and tell us all a little bit about him first.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me on, Sarah. And it's a pleasure to actually be on here. So a bit about me. Basically, by trade, I've defined myself as a mental wellbeing coach. But recently, in the past month, I've just been employed by a sports education company. So basically now I'm a wellbeing and welfare coach, which in a nutshell, what I do, I create programs around mental health and wellbeing and fitness, and then I incorporate it into sort of a package, and then I deliver it to either colleges, schools, gyms. At the moment, we've got about 8 traineeships coming out, which we've got about 4 MMA gyms, we've got 1 normal general gym, we've got a military base camp that we do. So, and we've got, I think, Whittle Grammar are doing one as well, and they're year 11 girls. So we've got a few mixtures of our programs that I'm writing, and then I'm going to be delivering as well. But as a whole team.
So is it predominantly aimed at young people, or is it youngsters and us oldies too?
Yes. So at that moment in time, the traineeship will be for 16 to 19-year-olds. That's just one aspect of what I'm working on now. But we do work on staff workshops. We do work on staff wellbeing courses and drop-in sessions for teachers and coaches and even parents. We have it for as well. So that will be directly with me though. Yeah. So I do that side of things. But obviously with Evo Sports Education, they do all the business side behind it all, behind the scenes, I should say.
Yeah. You do all the work and they do all the other stuff.
Yeah. No comments. No comments.
So I think we've chatted previously, and we were talking about kind of chatting about unpicking the culture of mental health for the adults in schools, particularly, yes. And unpicking that, and then maybe chatting around sort of some of how you might self-identify where you're at and how you check in with yourself, but also maybe some of the coping mechanisms and stuff like that. So and how we've just had a conversation off camera, haven't we? And it started going down a very interesting route.
So fast, wasn't it?
Escalated quickly. Unusual for me on a Saturday. So from your approach, what's your observations of the culture in school? And I'll come at this slightly differently, actually. Not all schools have got toxic cultures. We need to make that really clear, don't we? Definitely. And that within our group, we've kind of opened our arms and said, if you're in a toxic culture, come in.
Yeah.
But I think for every school that has got that thing that makes you feel like, there's at least one other school that doesn't. So it's not the whole profession. It's not every senior leadership team. It's not every school.
Of course.
That would be, I think that's really important. So, but your observations, what's it like in schools? You go into schools, what are you seeing on the ground?
So for me personally, again, I like the way you've not stereotyped, obviously, that every school has this issue with mental health and wellbeing. Not every school does have it. But again, most schools don't have the understanding or a concept sometimes of it, or an according appropriate concept. And that's sometimes worse when people don't even care. If you're trying to implement things and you implement it wrong, sometimes you're doing more damage than you are doing good. So I appreciate that some of the head teachers and some of the governors want to do well by the school, want to do well by the community, but it needs to be a specialist, it needs to be a professional, it needs to be someone who's even experienced something, that them sort of feelings, them sorts of emotions, and been in that sector. So obviously for me, going into schools, and mainly if I'm going into a primary school, let's say primary school, you see it all the time. These guys have got what, 10, 11 subjects teaching all day. Do they get time to be marking? Do they sometimes don't get PPE time? They're doing the marking. And I know a colleague of mine, or a friend of mine actually, he does his marking at lunchtime. That's his time. That's his time. He doesn't get any other time. Don't get me wrong, that could be him just saying that as well. So it's that misconception of, do you make time for yourself?
Yeah.
Do you go to your head teacher? Because I guarantee, if you go to speak to your head teacher or speak to your boss and go, listen, and be civil and be straight up, I'm struggling. I need a little bit of assistance here. You know, I haven't got time to mark this, that, the other. I guarantee most head teachers will probably go, okay, we'll do this. We'll try and help you here, help you out. Don't get me wrong, it's not all the time. You get some head teachers, when you have a conversation with them, you just go, you're not getting through to him at all. You're not, you're all here.
This is your job. Crack on with it.
That's it. You deal with it. And also, it's approachability, isn't it? Most head teachers need to be good leaders. They need, and a good leader is being approachable and leading by example as well. And unfortunately, not every head teacher has got that skill. And it's such a hard skill to acquire, isn't it? Let's be honest.
And there's a disconnect, isn't there? I mean, certainly my experience is secondary, and because primary terrifies the hell out of me. I couldn't cope with that many little people running around. And also, secondary is intensive, but it's intensive in different ways. I just think there can't be any respite for primary teachers. I don't think. But in secondary, there's a real, the higher up the ladder people get, and I got to deputy, and by the time I got to deputy, I think I was on about a 25% timetable, but I very much stayed feet on the ground, was in and out of people's classrooms, not to monitor, but I'd know where the troublesome groups were, and I would make sure that I was around. But for some, the higher up the ladder they climb, the more they retreat into their offices, and they might leave their door physically open, but they actually don't have an open door, and they become really removed from the reality of a teacher who's teaching 22 out of 25 periods a week and has got all of the really difficult groups on their timetables, and there's a 2-week marking policy, and there's this and there's that, and it just builds and builds. And I think being really personal to me, one of the reasons why I found myself in the position where I had to exit for myself was because I was far too people focused. I was far too no, I wasn't. I was right. I was people focused. I was
love it. Absolutely love it.
Person first.
Yeah, totally agree.
Whatever you need to do to get the job done, I will go out of my way to do it. Still expected high standards and all the rest of it, but the person came first, because if your teacher isn't well supported, then what do the kids get? They don't get what they're deserving of. And that didn't fit within the culture that was being built in my school. So I had to go, because that was perceived as soft or weak or whatever. Now I don't see it as that. I see it as that way's the right way.
Sense of frustration hearing that, there's just like in my mind.
And to see people thinking when because of systems and procedures and processes that don't add any value to the adult or to the child, is I would have had to have gone anyway, regardless of my circumstances at the time.
Yeah.
I know that I would have had to have gone, because I could not lead in that way that was not person focused.
Yeah.
And that's the disconnect for me, is that there's so many leaders seem to be coming up the system really rapidly who haven't properly cut their teeth with difficult classes in difficult circumstances, don't know the reality, but then are making these kind of policy decisions from on high and not actually involving the staff on the ground with it.
Of course.
That for me was the biggest issue.
Yeah.
That disconnect. So in terms of, do you see a lot of sort of I'm trying to be careful here, well-being as an adult rather than so do you see a lot of well-being tagged on as we're all going to do a yoga class, or we're all going to do this? It kind of enforced well-being rather than well-being at the heart of what the school does.
I'm going to answer this carefully myself. Yeah, I'm going to say yes and no. I'm going to say that, but from my personal perception, it's not good enough.
No,
hands down, it's not good enough. Don't get me wrong. I think it goes back to my earlier point that I think some teachers are genuinely trying to do the right thing. But if you don't have that knowledge there and you don't have that experience, teachers are trying something or they're trying to implement something and it might not work. And that's the whole thing about mental health and well-being. Sometimes it doesn't work, so it's not going to work for every child in the class. And that's what they need to think of it as. It is a lesson. It is a session. Like when you're teaching a child English, maths, do all of them learn the same? No. Do all of them learn from how you deliver it the same? No. So it's exactly the same sort of thing. So you obviously have to adapt. Unfortunately, with mental health and well-being being a bit of a touchy subject sometimes, I understand there's a sense of fear, there's a sense of being scared about, oh, I can't say that, or I can't do that. So it's kind of disassociating from it then, or it's kind of ticking a box and saying, oh, we've done a bit of mindfulness there, of a morning, of a morning, a form time, you've done 5 minutes, which is great. I'm not knocking that, but in reality of everything, is it good enough?
And in terms of that, that's if that's the perspective in terms of, or the approach in terms of working it for kids, then it becomes even more diluted in terms of the experience of trying to support the well-being of the adults in the building, doesn't it? Yeah.
It's a domino effect, isn't it?
Yeah.
It needs to stem from high above, and it needs to go throughout the school. Unfortunately, the people that, like yourself, you wanted to be person-centered, but you weren't at the top of the list. It was a hierarchy. There's still a hierarchy in that sort of role. Unfortunately, if I was a head teacher, I know yourself, if you had someone there to talk to, or even a teacher that come to you and asked you a simple question, oh, what about this? What about that? It's about being open-minded. Go, that's a good idea. We'll try it like this, or we'll try it like that. And that's what a good leader does. Whereas some head teachers, they'll come in, yourself. You've been in there yourself, and you go into a school. I go into that many schools, and I speak to their teacher. And when they come in, it's their way or the highway, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I think, I was talking to another person from the group yesterday, and had a lot of these conversations about teachers. I think when they're on the path to poor mental health, they don't necessarily see it, because what's happened is it's a slow build over a long period of time. Lots of microaggressions, or repeatedly suggesting ideas and having them knocked back, and so you start to think, well, God, is everything that I do really not a great idea.
I appreciate it.
And I think people, they fall into different camps. You're the one who speaks up because it comes from your heart, but then you're labelled as the bullshit bugger.
Yeah, of course.
I was that a little bit. You're also the one who sits there and listens to it all, and inside your head you're screaming, no, this is ridiculous. No. But you won't speak up because you don't want to be labelled. I was also that person as well. And you end up being this multi-personality human who, the core of you, the person who went into teaching for all of the right reasons, is kind of so far removed from the person that you've become.
Definitely.
You lose your sense of self. And I think your point about lived experience is so important. I'm a time to change champion as well, so I'm very vocal on social media, Twitter particularly, about, you know, telling my story and
of course,
speaking out and stuff. But I spoke out in school. I was open with the people above and below me about how I was struggling well before I left, and ultimately that was used against me. And that's the fear.
Definitely.
And fear.
It hurts as well. And people, you try and mask it when you hurt because you think that's normality. Oh, it's normal to get knocked back. It's normal to me ideas to be shunned away. Oh, it's normal to be brashed as this person that is always in trouble for speaking their mind or speaking their heart. You know, we live in this world where we can't say anything, but we're told we can. But we're made to be felt as in we can't, because that's the element. They'll go and tell you, oh yeah, you can say this, we've got this workshop, we've got this hub that you can write on your blog, and all this elements of stuff, which is great to have. But in reality, if you do speak out, what's the next step? What's going to happen really? Nothing. Or it's going to be more hassle for yourself, because they're going to figure out who it was, or they're going to ask to try and implement it, and then they'll know it's you. And then they'll label you as what? A troublemaker? Or is just stirring the pot, which sometimes you see in schools. You see some teachers, or you see some coaches, or even support staff that aren't doing a fantastic job. And sometimes it's hard to see that, and it upsets me, because I go, you've took this job for a reason. You, at one point in your career or your life, you've decided you want to teach kids. So you've got a passion for teaching, you've got a passion for caring, you've got a passion to lead these kids to be great adults, to be ready for the world, educate them. And then you see them and you go, where did you lose yourself on the journey? What was that point? And that's what every teacher that feels like that will listen now, that if you feel like that at that moment, think back, when was that moment that you thought, that's it for me, that's it, I've lost it, I've lost that passion. And once you realise, you'll either go, you need to part ways with it, or you need to go, get back on the horse and get going again. You know.
That's interesting, because I was talking to some friends yesterday, many of whom have found different schools to go to and have rediscovered that, and now talk very positively, like I did at the start, that it's not all schools, it's just that environment. Get out of that environment, you'll get your passion back. And they have, and that's amazing to see. But then you have some people who are so entrenched in it, and maybe overly loyal to a place that actually doesn't warrant their loyalty anymore, and they just sink into that brokenness. And that really concerns me, in terms of, coming back to something I said earlier, if a teacher's not well in themselves and they're not able to teach effectively because there's so many other concerns, worries, the anxiety, the number of people who are saying, I got to the point where I considered driving my car into a tree in order to not have to go into school. Do you know, But then what is going to happen to this current generation of children,
of course,
and the next generation of children who, through no fault necessarily of the teachers, that they've just, some of them have lost their joy, they've lost their passion, they've lost that enthusiasm, and so the kids aren't getting the best from them. What structural systemic damage is that going to do to a whole generation of young people?
Well, you've
without being overly dramatic, but
well, you're not. You're educated. I don't think you are being dramatic. I don't think the element of it is dramatic, because in a nutshell, it is. We're educating the young people. These young people are going to be the future. These young people, and when you don't view it like that, when you're teaching them, it's sometimes that's an issue, because you need to be the best version of you in order to be teaching them the best.
Yeah.
Because that's how the standard should be. Also, there's no sense of resilience anymore. There's no sense of mental toughness or mental fitness or anything like that anymore. Back in the day, there was. And that's, again, another thing with the kids these days. They'll say, oh, it's oh, someone just come through. I have to cut that one out now.
Is there somebody at the door?
Bear with me one more.
I will.
Sorry. We'll have to cut that one out, won't we? Oh, I could keep it in. That'd be quite funny, actually.
Fine. Yeah, it's comedy moments. Normally, I've locked my cat out, because normally my cat will walk across the screen, wave a bum in the camera, and then climb on my shoulder and pretend she's a parrot. So, and much of what I do these days involves me going, no, get off that.
Yeah. That's the set. He'll sit usually here, and I've got like this table here on my laptop, and he'll sit in front of me, but I've pulled it forward so he'll come in and he'll be there. Over on my Zoom sometimes, and I leave enough space, he'll come in, park himself like that, and I'll go.
Have you seen, just on a side note, have you seen any of Andrew Cotter, the sports commentator?
Oh yeah.
Have you seen his videos with his dogs over lockdown?
No, I haven't seen him. No.
They're so funny. He's done commentaries of doing different things with the dogs as though he's sports commentating, but he actually did a Zoom meeting with the two dogs.
Oh, did he?
Oh, it was so funny. It was so. I'll find the link and send it to you.
Yeah, definitely have a look today.
It was really fun. So is that so? How do you spot it? I didn't realise. I remember my mum. I got really offended about 8 or 9 years ago. She's a Daily Mail reader. That has its own issues for me. But we'll leave that aside. But she sent me an article that the headline was, "Is stress making you fat?" So many levels. This is wrong, Mum. Thank you. But actually, the premise of the article was about cortisol and and overeating and those sorts of things. So actually, she wasn't saying to me, "You're getting fat." What she was saying was, "I think you're stressed." But I didn't see it as that, and I railed against that, and I lived for a very long time on 60, 70 hours a week, all consuming, come home at 6, cook tea, read, do whatever with my boy, put him to bed, work again till midnight, get up, that cycle. And I just normalized that. That was what I needed to do my job, because I believed it was a vocation and it was my calling. It was I justified it and normalized it.
Of course, yeah.
To the point where I didn't see that I was stressed. I didn't see that I was suffering from anxiety. I didn't see that I was closing down a lot of the other aspects of my life that actually made me me. So how does somebody check in with themselves and
So,
learn
yeah.
to identify what's going on?
Um, to be honest, in a nutshell, what you need to be doing in their moment of time, you've got to look within, and you've got to be hard on yourself, and you've got to really face the fear in effect, because that's all it is, isn't it? At the end of the day, you've got to face it, because you're just masking all around you. You're masking it. Oh, it's okay. It's normal. This is my job. This is my calling. This is what I do. This is who I am. Well, hang on a minute. Rewind. It's not who you are. It's your profession. It's your career. It's a part. It's a part of who you are.
Yes.
And that's in a nutshell. Sometimes people can't visualize something in order to see you also have a social life. You also have other things, other priorities. It's not just work and no play. Because if you don't have the elements of that and a balanced life, then you find that that's when unhappiness comes about. That's when anxiety comes about. That's why depression comes about. It's all these mashes up or mix up a combination of things that affects us in them moments of time. And sometimes what happens, especially in the profession of teaching or coaching or some sort of educational setting, is because it's always on the go. You don't realize until you stop. So once you've stopped and hit rock bottom, you go, oh no, what? Your whole world comes crumbling down. Or it takes this one hectic moment to just go, boom, and then it all hits you at once. The combination of the last 10 years of you doing the same thing, Groundhog Day, every day, taking it on the chin every single day. But that's what the missing link for me. There's no problem taking it on the chin, but it's what you put in place in order to make you feel better. So it's a prime example. If you were working all them hours, but maybe in the week you had a day off, where you focused on you focused on the elements of what makes you happy, what makes you tick, what's your downtime, all these sorts of things that you can implement. So it's what's the best routine and structure for yourself. As an adult, it's hard for myself, and I do, this is my job. So I'd be a hypocrite to say, oh, this, that, and the other. I'm not that type of person. You have to really look within. You have to really try things. And you have to face it, no matter how scary it is or how much you think I can't do something. You'll face it, and you'll soon realise whether you can do it or you can't.
Do you think that as just adults generally, the way that, I mean, again, this is another rabbit hole, don't get me started about how society is, but do you think we're particularly effective at holding that mirror up to ourselves or not?
I think we're all scared sometimes. I think there's times in our lives, whether we're children, whether we're teenagers, whether we're adults, that mirror comes up. Like, that mirror does come up, and you've got to look at it. One way or another, you've just got to look. And I think it hits us at certain stages. And for some people, unfortunately, it doesn't even hit you. They just go on through life, just plodding along, doing their thing, and don't even realise. And that's why it's so important to take a step back and stop and think. Take a breath, think about the situation, think about what you're doing, where you're going, and then crack on with what you think is best. And if you don't know, that's when you communicate. Unfortunately, it's that there's bad people in the world, there's good people in the world, and it's the same with advice, it's the same with support, it's the same with guidance. We've all had some terrible advice. I was going to say the S word then before. No,
you carry on.
I know, imagine. I was going to say it, but we've all been there and gone and tried whatever that terrible advice was, and it just didn't work at all. But unfortunately, that knocks you down again. and you feel like sometimes you can't get back up, when in reality you can. It's got to be you to dust yourself off and go, right, let's go again, let's start again, let's try something different. And some people go throughout their whole lives not finding a solution, not finding a coping mechanism. But at least you try it.
One of my friends who's also a coach, I seem to be gravitating coaches towards me. I feel like a planet that's just pulling in all these moons at the moment.
Yeah, that's it.
And there's top level nerdery from you. But I trained with him. I went to uni with him, and he's coming on to have a chat. And you mentioned it before about mental toughness and mental resilience. He comes at it from in a business, in the private sector rather than education. And he always says something that his mum used to say, which was essentially, if you can't change it, then change how you respond to it, or change how you're interacting with it. So, you know, if you're in it and you can't change it, then you make a change and decide whether that's stay in it and do something different, or do one. And that's right, but that's so hard, isn't it? Particularly when you're tied into salary and a lifestyle, and
definitely.
It's that fear thing again, isn't it? So
definitely.
Talk to me about grief, about walking away from so let's say somebody is brave and goes, I was going to use the F word then, sod it, I'm away. There's a grieving process then, isn't there? And I didn't realise that I was going through grief when I literally spent about 3 weeks on the sofa watching, I don't know, whatever, the Housewives of whatever, and eating chocolate and crisps and drinking.
Watching Loose Women, or was that just
me?
No, that's just me, I think.
That's like, oh really?
Oh yeah. Oh no, let's not go started on that. Guilty pleasures and everything. Hey, they'll change the world, then, women, I'm telling you.
Oh dear. But it is a grieving process, isn't it?
It can be. I from a personal viewpoint, I'll tell you obviously two variations of my own experience in that. Sometimes if you don't think about it, you don't realise. I didn't realise, like you said, until, obviously it must have hit you straight away. But it didn't hit me until I went somewhere else and realised, hang on a minute, my calling isn't that. My calling was that. And I went away from it because I thought, don't know whether I thought I was better than it, or whether I thought it wasn't for me, whether I didn't like the rules and regulations, whether it made me feel a certain way some days, some weeks. And then when I went somewhere else, I went, the grass is greener on the other side, you know. And it might not have been the school, it might not have been in the company, but it was what I love doing, the implementing of the coaching, the implementing the teaching, the educating, that side of things. Even when I was doing it through uni, I was doing it through working at other places and doing all sorts of jobs. It hit me when I moved on from it, and it went, hang on a minute, that's what you're amazing at, and that's what you love doing, and you've just went back. And it took in my head, it just went, every day I was working a new job and I was thinking, I'm just not interested here. I'm not interested doing what I'm doing. Let's get back to this. And what it was for me, it was a sense of depression. And it was an element of depression, that I was down, but I was going to work every day. But I wasn't feeling me.
Being very mechanistic. Yeah.
I was feeling fatigued. I was feeling down. I wouldn't eat as much. I was feeling weak. You know, all these things I was feeling. I was like, oh, maybe it's my diet. Or maybe, it's because I'm doing longer hours. No, it's because of your feelings and your emotions of the previous job that you've just missed out on, that you've just left, you know. And it hits people in a different way. people are going to watch this, it's going to hit them in a different way. And that's sometimes a good thing and a bad thing, because a good thing and bad thing is that you have to find the solution yourself.
Yeah.
That's a good and a bad thing, because sometimes there is no solution until it just hits you, or until you try something and it's trial and error.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because when I came out and the first few weeks, I mean, I've done a video, I've called it Recovery Positions, and I've kind of gone through the process that I went through. So initially, and even in the run-up, I'd been applying for jobs doing the same thing, but just in different places.
Yeah.
Got a couple of interviews, came away from those interviews knowing that actually I was grateful that I hadn't got them. And then started to move away from it, and then I came to a point, probably only about 8 or 9 weeks after I left, where I said, right, that's it. The education system spat me out royally. I've been rejected by it, and that was the language I used in my head. It's rejected me. I'm not good enough for it. Blah blah blah. I'm never setting foot in a school again. I am never going to teach again. And for 6 months, that was essentially what happened. And then I dipped my toe into tutoring. And after my first tutoring session with a group of 6 kids in a church hall as part of a bigger thing, I was like, oh God, I actually really do love teaching the kids, and I miss that. And why would I not do that? But I don't want to be in schools. And then within about 4 weeks, I ended up doing a couple of placements in schools where I'd go in for 2 hours, tutor a kid for 1-to-1, and then bugger off again. And actually it was like, oh, well, okay, I've broken that. I've stepped foot inside a school, and I didn't spontaneously combust or break down. So that's good. And I started to reconnect with something that was really core to me, but I also missed the work with adults. I missed the people coming to me and asking if I'd got 20 minutes and sitting and unpicking the problem, and then going away going, that's fantastic, thank you so much, you've helped me so much. And that realization that actually I've been a coach and a leader for 20 odd years, and that actually that's at the core of me. I'm a leader, but not in that very rigid, you're a senior leader of a school.
I know what you mean.
And rediscovering that, I mean, I've rediscovered that because I'm being coached.
Yeah.
And my coach is absolutely amazing, and she challenges me, and she makes me ask myself hard questions.
Yeah.
And that's really clarified for me in the last few months who I am.
Yeah.
And that education is something that I need to be doing, but I can do it in so many different ways.
Self-awareness is so important.
It is. And so I think it's that thing about not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, isn't it? Without using the cliche, that you might actually, it might not be that you need to come out of teaching, but actually you just need to find a better environment or a different environment for doing the thing that you love, at which point your passion for it comes back. And then you're back to vocation and following your passion.
It's a visualization and realization for me as well. Have a sense of visualization. Look back at when you don't want to teach anymore, or you don't want to coach anymore, or there's sort of anxiety around the role, or depression, or just certain feelings, certain emotions, overwhelming feelings. Look back, when did that start happening? Why did that start happening? Ask yourself all these questions, like you said there. Your coach is asking you the hard, tough questions you don't want to ask yourself because you don't want to know the answer. No one wants to know the answer because it's tough, it's hard, and sometimes it's hard to ask yourself because you've got to really look within. you've got to really look. And it's like, you know, from an outsider's perspective point, you know yourself sometimes that you're doing stuff and you think, oh, why is that not working? Why is this? And then someone will go, you don't even know, or just seeing you do it. Go, is it that? And you'll go,
oh yeah.
How do you know that? And that's sometimes as simple when you ask someone a question, or you'd ask them, you know, do you feel like this? And they'll go, yeah, I felt like that. I've done this X, Y, and Z. And you'll go, and it's a sense of relief that you go, you're not on your own. And sometimes that's a harsh thing as well. You feel like you're alone, when in reality, you feel lonely when you're not alone.
Yeah.
And it's such a strange feeling, because when I say it to people, they either go, I know what you mean, or they go, what do you mean by that? You either know what I mean or you don't know what I mean.
I think people find it difficult. I know being asked tough questions, being challenged back. Sometimes, I mean, part of that, if you've been subjected to such a sort of level of scrutiny at school that everything potentially is you going to get in trouble. But I think sometimes it's very difficult to accept that you also have some personal responsibility for the situation that you're in and the way that you're feeling, and it's not about blame. So it's not about blaming yourself or where you're at, but actually going, well, okay, I am where I'm at, and I might have made some tough decisions along the way, or circumstances might have put me here, but I am the one who can do something about it, and I'm the only one who can do something about it.
Taking responsibility, isn't it? That's what I think you're getting at.
And I think, but do you think that people end up sort of stuck because the people who are closest to them don't challenge them? That actually, I mean, I think about my husband has obviously sat and seen me be very stressed for a long time, and he's done things to try, you know, let's go out for the day, let's do this. He's super supportive, amazing man. But actually, I probably needed something more like my mum going, right, will you look at what you're doing? And I need my nana. Unfortunately, my nana died a few years ago. And if my nana had seen this over the past 2 years, she'd have, I mean, she was Scouse, born and bred. So she'd have hauled me over the coals. She'd have told me to give me a head a wobble. She'd have told me to tell them to. But you know what? I needed that. I needed somebody to go, get a grip.
Get
a grip and take responsibility for yourself. And you're a grown up. Put your big girl pants on and let's do something about it.
Of course. Yeah. You're totally right there. You're totally right. We all have them people. We all have them people where when the going gets tough and you can't solve it yourself, you find that person, you seek them out. And it's not like you tell them straight away. You'd have a little bit of a moan or you'd have a little bit of a whinge, don't you? You don't say the problem.
Get around it.
You make up like this elaborate thing in your head that it's this feeling. But in reality, it's just, they'll tell you as simple as it is. My dad's the same. My dad's such a wonderful bloke. But he's so empathetic, and that's another key part of my work. Like, and that's why I resonate in being empathetic. So, how would you feel? How would you feel in their shoes? You know, I try and put myself in their shoes and go, right, how would I feel? What would I do? What would I implement? And then let's get going. So, prime example, a couple of months ago, I was doing a lot of work at home, but then I had to go in. I had to go inside. I had to go into places and have a few meetings inside. And I had a bit of anxiety about it. Wasn't ashamed to say it. Could say it out loud. But my attitude, why can't I do it from home?
Got a bit bolshy.
Yeah, I got a bit arsey. I got a bit. I'm a diva.
Yeah.
I got a bit of to go, well, I can do it from home and I don't want to catch this, I don't want to do that. And I got a bit like that. And I told everyone, I spoke to everyone, all my friends, my girlfriend, everyone, and no one said anything to me, just let me rant. And I told my dad, and he went, you're scared of going back, aren't you? And I went, no, what do you mean? And he went, tell me the truth. And I went, I just laughed. I laughed because he hit the nail on the head, and I just needed someone to tell me and go, it's okay to be scared to go back, but what you're doing now is not the right way. Yeah. You need to be putting something else in place, and you need to be getting on with it, because that's your job, mate. And I just went, how are you so good at this? I just thought to myself, some people have it, some people have them.
Yeah. And going back kind of full circle to being in an environment that is toxic, that those people that cause the toxicity, and let's be honest, they're not necessarily all senior leaders. It can happen at all levels. You get your cliques and your little groups that sit and whisper, and it happens at every level. But those people don't have that empathy. They cannot put themselves in somebody else's shoes, and it almost makes them, I guess, a little bit sociopathic or
elements. And I think sometimes it comes down to thinking. If you don't think, then you're not going to know. There's like prime example with your husband. Sometimes when my girlfriend comes in and she's had a tough day, all she wants is a hug. Sometimes all she wants is some flowers or some. But if I don't know, or I don't sense the vibes, or I don't see the aura, or sometimes it is tough. It is tough to have a bit of realization. So that's why I always emphasize the communicating.
Yes.
You tell me how you feel, and then I can make something work for you. I can have a little bit of impact.
Yeah, because we're not psychic, are we?
No, we're not. And that's the hard thing about it. And that's why I think with mental health issues and well-being sorts of issues, you have to hit rock bottom sometimes, because it's a build-up. As you said, it's a build-up, and then you just go crumble down. And then you have to talk to someone, because there's what's the other option? And we've both been there on the floor where you go, there's only two options: straight down again, or is it back up?
I hit the point twice where I was utterly convinced, and it was fleeting, but I was utterly convinced that the only thing that would make life better for the people around me, not for me, was to not be here. And that scared, and I will use the word, that did scare the shit out of me. Yes. And I then reached out. I did it in a really roundabout way the first time. I kind of did this sort of, is it possible that something that I'm doing might make me experience this? At which point somebody who knew went, your office now, ring your doctors, you need to go and see them straight away, because that is not, I was, without being too graphic about it, I was having lucid daydreams of sitting in my office and hurting myself in my office, so that the people who were making me feel that way would find me. Now that's not normal.
You know what? I'm going to disagree with you there.
Oh, really?
I'm going to disagree with you. I think normalizing them feelings, it is okay at that time. You know, that's how you felt.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what annoys me in the whole setting of that, because someone has made you feel that way. Whether they know it or not is a different story, but someone's made you feel in that certain way and feel that sort of emotion. That is normal to feel that way. And I'll just go, obviously, without being graphic myself, in my circumstance, I felt, like I said earlier, about feeling alone when I wasn't even lonely. I was surrounded by the best people, the best supporting network. And that's, I think, what confused me even more. I was like, I was trying to fight it. I was trying to go, you've got an amazing family, you've got an amazing person that loves you so much. You've got it. You've got the dog. You've got this. You've got a career. You're going places. But I still felt this overwhelming feeling of depression. And it was depression. And when I went to see someone about it, because I needed an outlet, no one was fixing me, and that's what the thought process, I need to be fixed, I need to be this, It wasn't about being fixed, it wasn't about curing anything, it was about putting something in place that was positive, because that's me, it's going to be a part of my life forever.
Yes.
And that's, the sooner you realise that and put things in place, positive coping mechanisms in place, the better. So I got to a point where I was talking to the GP, and she gave me the two options. You probably know the options. First of all, prescribe me some happy pills, I'm going to call them.
Yeah.
Because that's what they are.
Yeah.
The second was, go on a waiting list
for 18 months.
Bang on 18 months. And I sat there and she went, what would you like? What would you prefer? And I went, I'd probably prefer to talk to someone, to be honest, but if it's in 18 months, I need to talk to someone now. And she went, oh, well, we've got this, and just gave me a list of certain external companies. And I just thought, and it was like an instant, and it just was like a light switch. And I thought, it's only you going to get out of this, mate. It's you. You can do it. And it's like we said earlier, sometimes you've got to hit rock bottom to climb yourself back up. And that's what it did. At that moment there, and I thought, you don't give a shit. And the society that we're in doesn't give a shit. And unfortunately, we live in that whole cycle of people are trying to tick boxes, people are trying to help. I understand that people are trying to help, but if you haven't got the knowledge, you haven't got the experience, you haven't got the capacity to help someone or support someone and give them guidance, then there's no point. It's got to be you.
No, and it's that thing, is that I think of it, I reflect on it now as kind of looking down a dark well, and actually looking down the dark well, I couldn't see anything. When I hit the bottom of that well and I'm flat on my back and I'm looking up, I could see light. I could see a way out, and that's kind of with the benefit of reflection. That's how I visualize it now in my head. But it is hard. I mean, I'm on low dose happy pills, and I want to come off them. But I am on like super low dose, so I'm actually not convinced that they're doing anything at all for me anyway.
Don't worry about obviously justifying yourself. And I think we find ourselves, I do it sometimes, because it's say if I'm writing something, if I'm teaching or I'm coaching or something, and I'll spell something, I'll go, oh, I'm dyslexic, by the way. And I'll go,
why does that even
need to say that? Why do you need to? You don't need to explain yourself. You've got, it's a spelling mistake. But because there's a stigmatization attached to it, it makes you feel like you've got to justify. And that's another tough thing, isn't it? With stigmatization, like we're made to feel, even though no one's saying anything, we're made to feel it's this, when in reality it's all okay.
It's interesting because I was messaging someone. I was messaging Sharon last night and about something, and she won't mind me saying that normally when Sharon and I are messaging, I know Sharon's level of messaging back. It's usually quite deep and thoughtful, and I was getting these really short messages back, and I was like, because I'd asked a question that potentially I felt could have been quite contentious. So we had this little back and forth, and then I was like, have I offended you in some way? Do you know that voice was like, you've upset her. And she then sent me a picture of the fact that, I mean, it was about 11 o'clock at night and she was cooking shepherd's pie. She still hasn't explained to me why she was, but she sent me pictures of her kitchen. Like, this is what I'm doing. And then this morning she said to me, if you offend me, you will know you've offended me, because I will say to you, you've offended me. And so stop with that. Just stop with it. But it's that sometimes those little voices, even though you think you've got them sort of in their own boxes. Sometimes they just manifest a little bit, don't they?
I think we're like that. Like, that's why I think we get on. I think we're like, it's not an element of being straightforward. It's an element of being inquisitive, isn't it? Really, you're like that. You don't want to hear that voice, so you want to get that voice out there, don't you? You go, have I done something? Have I done this? Have I done that? And you work yourself up until you say it and figure out what it is. I can tell you all. I'm like that as well. I'm exactly like that.
It's funny, isn't it? So, what would your because believe it or not, we've been talking for well over an hour. I don't even know how that has happened.
Time flies.
What would be your kind of top 5 takeaways for teachers? What can they be doing?
So for me, I would say 1, nurture your resilience. Make sure your resilience is on point. If you have to go through something tough, do it. If you have to face your fear, do it. Feel that fear and just do it anyway. Especially if you can see a goal in sight. So it doesn't go to step A or 1 to 10, does it? It doesn't go to 1 to 10. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to go that way. It could go up in odds or evens, couldn't it? So it's that step and process. Build on that resilience. Say 2, I like to address the stress. You know, address it, face it. Again, it's an element of the resilience part. If you're not highlighting where you're stressed and how you're getting stressed, you're never going to get a solution. You're never going to have a coping mechanism in place. And it's not just having any sort of coping mechanism. It's all right if it is a negative one at the time, because we all have them. Some days we come in and I'll have some chocolate, or I'll have a big
fridge
chocolate. Yeah, there you go. I've had a bad day. I'll hold my hand up. We all do that. That's okay. But doing it every single night as you come in stressed is not good for you.
Yeah.
And that's the cycle you need to get out of if you are in that cycle.
Yeah.
Say 3, engage in that self-care. Look after you. It's you that are teaching these kids. It is you that are teaching them to be the best adults they can be, and have a bit of pride and passion about that. I know it's tough at times, but if you're being a bit selfish with you, the best version of you will ooze out into them, and they'll feel that. They see the aura. Happiness is the best drug ever. So if they see you happy when you're teaching and you're just having a good time in your role, obviously seriousness, teaching, education, but at the end of the day, that's what kids resonate with. If it's a little bit of fun, it's a little bit
it's energetic and it's passionate, and
exactly.
I mean, I know one of my friends is the strictest, most regimented teacher I know, but she is so bloody full of energy. She's like Tigger on speed.
I see.
And she does everything like that. I mean, she exhausted me when I used to work with her. But the kids loved her because they always left that room energized. They always knew that she was like that because she just wanted the best for them.
Yeah, that's it.
And they loved the kind of military strictness that was done with. It was done with a gentle touch. It was done with heart,
empathy, passion, or compassion. And that's what it is. If you love your job, that will ooze out. And unfortunately, that's some of the teachers have fell out of love and fell out of touch with who they are as well. Because don't forget, you're the one that chose to be a teacher. You're the one that chose to be a coach in the educational system. Think back why. So I'd say 4. I'd say support each other. Build that support network. You know, like you felt alone. You felt no one had your back. When in reality, if you probably asked around or just pitched a little few little bits and bobs there, you probably would have found, oh yeah, I think that. But I felt the same, and it makes you feel empowered. Then you go, you're not alone. Someone else feels something that you're feeling. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't always work the way you want to work. You get a lot of snakes and a lot of rats in a lot of workplaces, and that's not just the educational system. I'd say in 5, I'd say probably one of the main ones in this job, because it is hectic, it is intense, it is long hours. I'd say look for signs of burnout, and don't be afraid, don't be scared to seek help. You know, people think going, I need help is a weakness. We're all guilty of it. I do it sometimes, and sometimes I've got to snap myself out of it and go, it is a strength. You're asking to better yourself, you're asking to learn, you're asking to be a better version of yourself. So I'd say they're the 5 elements, key elements that I would say.
And so I know what I would now ask as a stroppy bullshit bugger is, okay, look out for the signs of burnout. What are the signs of burnout? How do I know that I'm burnt out?
So basically, like, do you drag yourself to work? Do you find yourself getting up and going, well, you're debating whether you should be even going to work. So it's elements of that. Do you feel quite cynical? Do you feel quite irritated for no reason, no apparent reason whatsoever when you get up, or while you're in school, or while you're in the staff room? Do you get impatient quite quickly? You're quite snappy lately? Have you lost fulfillment in your career? You know, that sense of passion, that sense of joy, that sense of enthusiasm like your friends got. Do you have a low energy all the time? Like I said, that's what I had. I had, not that I wasn't passionate or compassionate in my workplace. I just had low. I felt down. I felt like I couldn't really just get out of second gear. And sometimes that'll happen. Sleep, diet, nutrition. If they're getting affected, you're not being able to sleep well. You find yourself picking out when you didn't even used to. You find yourself drinking a lot more as well. That's another element of things to mask how you're feeling, to help you sleep. You know, there's any other physical symptoms as well, like stress can bring on a lot of other symptoms like headaches and stomach ulcers and all them sorts of problems. Like, people don't realise stress is such a knock-on effect with your physical capability as well. That's why it's good to address.
Fundamentally, isn't it? It's nervous system, and you go back to adrenaline and cortisol constantly around your system, and it affects you.
That's it. You're right. Totally right.
I know. I've been teaching kids in the last few weeks about the nervous system and stuff, and going, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I know all of this stuff, but why have I not read?
I know.
Anyway,
you have to recap sometimes, don't you, to kind of go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. Well, you get a question, don't you? And you'll have to wing the answer like what you think, and you go, God job, that was right, weren't it? You know, there's elements of that sometimes where, you know,
life.
You've got to on the spot answer the question that you think you know the answer.
Make it.
Yeah, that's it. I know. That's it. Yeah, sometimes it is like that because you're the role model, you're the teacher, you're the educator. You need to know what you're doing, and if you don't,
I had a stock phrase. It wasn't often that kids asked me questions that I didn't know the answer to, but my stock phrase was, "Do you know, that's really interesting? I'm not sure, but let's see who finds out quicker."
See, I didn't do that. I always had the answer, whether it was right or wrong. Debatable.
No, you see, because I worked with kids who would come back to you 2 days later and go, "You know, when you said that, well, you were wrong," and I can't be doing with being wrong. So yeah, it would be challenge accepted. Let's see who can come back and I tell you what, the number of kids who used to come to me while I was on duty or walking on the corridor and go, "Oh, miss, this is the answer to that question." I'd be like, and I'd have forgotten about it. Like, oh yeah, well done. That's what I found out too.
Yeah. Well, luckily in my role, it's a very grey area anyway. So there's no right or wrong answer. There's just what perception or individuals think, and you know what I mean. It'd be like that because that is the truth as well with obviously what I do.
Yeah.
So it's great. I like when the kids are like that. Like, I want them to talk out. I want them to challenge me. I want them to say, well, what about this? Or what about that? I felt like this, or I felt like that. That's what we need. We need to communicate because my feelings are not the same as yours.
But that's what we need adults to be. We need adults 100%, to get back 100%. To that childlike, inquisitive, there is no wrong I just want to explore how I'm feeling. I think young people are so much better. I know they manifest it in different ways, but they haven't lost that inner inquisitor who wants to find out.
Of course.
But by the time we've hit adulthood, we've kind of built loads of walls around that.
Yeah, it's hard to unlearn it when you're an adult. Like bad, I wouldn't even say bad habits. I would just say your personality traits and what you steer towards. It is tough to unlearn it and manipulate it and change it. I know we change over time. Excuse me, but we change over time, not through thinking about it. We just change. We adapt. We do certain things. But when you have to think about changing something, it's just a million times harder. Definitely.
On that note, I am going to go and get myself another cup of tea. It's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much.